Hey everyone, hope you're doing really well and welcome back to my channel. So this is now my third video of the Ucat series, and as you can see by the title, today I'm going to talk about my personal favourite section of the exam, quantitative reasoning, aka maths sort of. And I'll be sharing my secrets as to how I scored 890 out of 900 in this section, so stay tuned. If you've never come across my channel before, welcome. My name's Julia and I'm a third year medical student at a university in London called King's College. So to start off with, let's really quickly go through what quantitative reasoning actually is. So essentially, this section of the exam assesses your ability to use numerical skills to solve problems. The questions in this section are less often to do with theoretical numerical calculations and more to do with simple problem solving, and so there's an element of logical thinking that needs to come in as well as maths. However, you'll be reassured to know that the difficulty of these questions is assumed to be at a standard pass at GCSE, so nothing too complex. And hopefully with a bit of practice, patience and most importantly speed, you'll be able to do really well in this section. The format of this section consists of 36 questions which need to be done in 24 minutes, which if we do the maths gives you about 40 seconds per question. However, once again, don't let that fool you, because just like the rest of the exam, you'll still be very pressured for time, and so the key here is to stay focused and to be precise. Now, before you start revising for this section of the exam, it's super important that you're familiar with a few basic formulas. So that includes calculating averages, percentages, fractions and ratios, and conversions between the two. Geometric formulas such as calculating areas and volumes of shapes, especially circles. You also want to be comfortable with reading complex graphs and charts, and you need to be familiar with the common formula for problem solving. So for instance, travel, so speed being distance over time, currency conversions including interest rates and percentage changes. I think I'll be putting up a screen at the end of this video with all the formulas that you need to know, so stay with me. Firstly, try not to get intimidated by the presentations and the data sets that are usually on topics that you'll know nothing about. So remember, the examiners are only assessing your ability to manipulate numbers and formulas to solve an equation, not your ability to analyse the next 50 years of the UK's average salary. In this section, every single question is worth 1 mark, and just like in all the other sections, you have easy questions and you have difficult questions. So easy questions are those that can be solved just by reading or eyeballing the data, or perhaps doing one simple calculation, while the difficult questions will involve probably 2 or more calculations to get to an answer, and usually contain a lot of graphs and a lot of data. The good thing about quantitative reasoning is that you can read a question and within 2 seconds know if it's going to be an easy question or a difficult one, and sort of roughly estimate how much time it's going to take you. Now, since you are so tight on time, if you've watched my other videos you know what I'm about to say. If you come across a difficult question, of which in this section there shouldn't be more than about 7 or 8, what you want to do is flag, guess and go. And this is especially applicable if you have a question with a very large data set. Maths is unfortunately very easy to get wrong, either by accidentally miscalculating something or missing a value, for instance if you're adding up for an average, and so it's really important to try not to fall into a pitfall of spending too much time on a question which at the end you potentially may not even feel too confident about. As I've said before, getting about 80% correct in a section will give you a score of about 800. So in an ideal perfect world, you want to be scoring 25 or above in this section. And in order to do that, you need to put all of your attention into the simple questions first that can be done quickly and confidently. That moves me on to my next point, which is to practice using the online calculator tool attached to the exam. Now, the calculator, in my opinion, is really inconvenient and it's super easy to mess up with, and so it's vital that you get that practice ahead of the real thing. And you can do that on the official Ucat website by trying out their mocks on there which have the calculator incorporated into the exam, or also on other similar websites like Medify, which also have practice mock papers with the calculator also incorporated. Be extra cautious of accidental typos and try and use the actual numbers on a number pad attached to your laptop or computer rather than clicking through with a mouse, because it saves so much time and it's more accurate. And on top of that, if you can, try and double check your calculations if you have a spare few seconds to make sure that you've definitely got it right. On top of that, you really want to try and ace your mental maths game, which can also save you some time in the exam. And that includes things like cube numbers, square numbers, and multiplications up to 15 if you can, which will save you from having to use the calculator. Also, don't forget that in the exam you get given a whiteboard and a pen, so make sure that you use that to your advantage. And that's especially the case for longer questions that require 2 or more steps, so make sure that between each intermediate step you just jot down the answer that you got so that you don't lose track and help yourself out. Even as you're reading a scenario, it might be helpful to jot down any key figures that you've worked out from the graphs, which could potentially help you save some time with future questions that use the same data set so that you don't have to go back and re-look and recalculate. It can also be used to help you visualise which values you want to use for your final calculations, which can prevent silly mistakes from happening. So just trust me when I say, use that whiteboard and don't be shy of it. My next top tip is don't overcomplicate things. So like I said, the questions in this section require the use of fairly basic mathematical formulas. So if you find yourself having to use something more advanced or something weird and wacky to get to your answer, then you're probably on the wrong track and you're probably overcomplicating it. Try to keep it sweet, steady and simple, okay? Remember, this isn't an A-level maths exam, it's just simple problem solving at GCSE. Another top tip to save time is to try and convert as few numbers as possible. Now what I mean by that is, for example, if you're asked to calculate, let's say, the area of a house in square meters, but you're given all the measurements in feet, what you don't want to be doing is converting each length one by one. So if in a question you're given different scales, whether that's distance or speed or weight, just try and remember to leave the converting right to the end. And that way you're also reducing the number of times that you can accidentally make a critical error by miscalculating. And so when you're doing a question like that, always think to yourself, is this the easiest route I'm taking, or am I making my life a bit difficult? Something else to consider if you're very short on time is to guesstimate and eliminate answers where you can. So if you find yourself stuck at a question where you think it's just going to take you a while, what you can do is just roughly round the numbers to the nearest 10 and just do the most basic bare minimum quick maths in your head or on the calculator to see if that guides you to the right answer. Especially for questions like averages, for instance, sometimes it's enough to just scan through the data and right off the bat you'll be able to eliminate 1 or 2 options, which will obviously increase your chances of guessing the right answer if you are really short on time and you just have to guess. Obviously that's not always possible if all of your options have a difference of like 0.1, but if it is possible to guesstimate, then do so and save yourself that time. Speaking of decimals, one super important piece of advice is to double and triple check exactly what the question is asking for if your calculations leave you with a decimal. So if a question asks you to round to the nearest whole number, for instance, then that's easy enough because you can either round up or down. But if it asks something like, how many packs of apples does Julia need to make a pie for 80 people, then remember you always have to round up. Because obviously you can't buy half a pack, right? It sounds so obvious, but it's actually these silly mistakes that are what prevent people from getting those top scores. And so just make sure that you're not in a rush, you slow down and you read the question carefully. To add to that, make sure that you're super careful when you're estimating values from graphs. So you want to be super accurate and double check the scales on the axes compared to the question. Those extra 2 or 3 seconds that you spend double checking a graph or double checking a scale are what are going to prevent you from making those silly mistakes. As a final note, and this isn't an absolute promise, but everyone that I've spoken to that's already sat the UCAT, including myself, believe that the questions in the actual exam are a bit easier than those in the most popular revision books and resources. So don't be too discouraged if you're making loads of mistakes now, because that's what practice is for. When I was revising, I think I would have been averaging about 700, 750. I don't think I ever hit 800, let alone 890. So I was super lucky with my final exam. Just make sure that you don't neglect your weaknesses either, because I know that I really struggled with currency conversions and interests, for instance, and so looking back, I think if I was unlucky and if loads of questions had come up on that, then I would have really struggled. So just make sure that you're confident and that you've practiced all of the main topics and formulas really well. Also, it goes without saying, but please make sure that you practice under timed conditions, because that's the #1 thing that brings students down. So just get used to being pressured for time and doing the quick maths with the extra adrenaline. Once you start to build in confidence, which you will as you progress through revision, just try your best to avoid rushing, because the worst thing you can do is misinterpret or misinformation entirely because you are overconfident and in a rush. As I said, most of these questions just require basic maths, so you just need to work out which formula you need to use to get to the right answer. And that brings me to the end of this video. I hope you found it somewhat useful. Remember to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you did, and comment below what your favourite top tips are for quantitative reasoning, and maybe we can all help each other out. I'll be creating more videos soon on all the other sections of the UCAT, and they'll all be linked in the description below, so make sure to check them out. Best of luck if you're sitting the exam this year. Remember, we all really struggled, but the more practice you do, the better you'll get, and so just stay at it, keep motivated, keep going. I'll be putting up a screen with all the formulas that you need to know after this, so best of luck again, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye!